nestled among rolling hills, its fields golden with wheat and its evenings softened by the sound of crickets. In that town lived Clara Whitmore, the daughter of a respected school teacher. Clara was known for her quiet grace, the kind of woman who carried herself with dignity, yet whose laughter lit up every gathering. On summer afternoons, Clara often walked by the old wooden bridge that crossed the creek. It was there she had first met Daniel Hay, a tall, broad-shouldered young man with dark hair and eyes that carried both mischief and kindness. Daniel worked on his family's farm, his days spent tending cattle and fixing fences, yet he always seemed to find time to walk Clara home after Sunday service. Secret notes slipped into hymn books, and the promise of futures they scarcely dared to speak aloud. Clara dreamed of teaching, of raising children in a home filled with books and music. Daniel dreamed of building a farmhouse on the ridge, where he could see the sunrise spill across the fields. But in the spring of that year, war came. The nation fractured, torn between North and South, and Willow Creek found itself swept into the storm. Men whispered of duty, honor, and sacrifice. Neighbors argued on porches, brothers quarreled at supper tables. The war was not a faraway rumor, it was a shadow falling across every home. Daniel, like many young men, felt the call. Though his heart longed to stay by Clary's side, he could not ignore the tide sweeping through the south. "It will be quick," he promised one evening as they stood by the bridge, fireflies glowing around them. "They say it will be over in a matter of months." Clara clutched his hand, her heart twisting. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Daniel Hayes. Promise me only this, that you'll come back." Daniel leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers. "I'll come back," he whispered. "No matter what it takes." That night, Clara pressed into his hand a small locket, a golden oval that had belonged to her mother. Inside was a lock of her hair, tied with a white ribbon. Daniel swore he would carry it always. Days later, he was gone, marched away with the other young men of Willow Creek, their gray uniforms sharp in the morning sun, leaving behind families who waved through tears. And Clara? She began her vigil. She wrote him letters every week, pouring her heart into every word, even when months passed without reply. She walked by the bridge, whispering prayers into the wind. And though life went on, teaching children, helping her father, tending the garden, her heart lived half a world away, on battlefields she could not see. The first months of war passed in a haze of uncertainty. Clara kept to her routine, teaching children their letters, mending her father's shirts by lamplight, tending to the hens in the yard, but every task felt hollow without Daniel's laughter nearby. Letters began to arrive, carried by weary riders who stopped at the post office before riding on. Clara's heart leapt whenever her name was called. "Dearest Clara," Daniel had written in his firm but hurried hand. "The days are long, yet thoughts of you shorten them. I keep your locket close to my heart. When I march, it taps against my chest, as though reminding me that part of you walks with me." She read his words by the fire, her eyes wet with both joy and longing. In her replies, she painted pictures of home, the bridge where they had first met, the scent of fresh bread cooling on the window, the children laughing in the schoolyard. She wanted him to feel the life he was missing, to remember what waited when the war ended. But war was not kind. Daniel's second letter spoke of camp life, muddy boots, thin rations, the endless drills shouted by stern officers. By the third, the tone had shifted. He wrote of smoke, the roar of cannon fire, the earth shaking beneath his feet. He described comrades falling beside him, men who had spoken of wives and sweethearts only hours before. "Clara," he wrote, "there are nights when the stars above the camp remind me of home. I imagine you standing beneath the same sky, whispering my name. It keeps me steady. It keeps me alive." Clara held those letters to her chest, reading them until the ink began to fade. She prayed for him each night, lighting a candle at the window so he might feel its glow across the miles. But fear crept in with the winter winds. Not all families received letters. Some received folded telegrams instead, short, cruel notices of death. Clara often walked past homes with shutters drawn, the air heavy with grief. She whispered silent thanks for every word she received from Daniel. And still, the war pressed on. In the spring of 1862, news reached Willow Creek of a great battle fought miles away. Dozens of men from nearby towns had fallen. Clara waited breathlessly for Daniel's next letter, her hands trembling each time she opened the envelope. At last, one came. The handwriting was shakier than before, blotched as though the pen had trembled. My beloved Clara, I have seen things that no man should. Yet I live, though the memory of the fallen weighs on me. I cannot speak of details, for they would bring you sorrow, but know this, your face is my anchor. When smoke surrounds me, I close my eyes and see you at the bridge, sunlight in your hair. It is enough to carry me forward. Clara pressed the letter to her lips, her tears smudging the ink. She did not know how long the war would last, nor whether Daniel's promise to return could truly be kept. But she knew this, as long as letters came, hope remained alive. By the summer of 1862, the war had tightened its grip. Willow Creek's fields no longer rang with laughter, too many sons had gone, too many fathers never returned. The women shouldered heavy burdens, planting crops, repairing fences, and praying for letters that sometimes never came. Clara did her best to stay strong. She kept the school running, though many benches sat empty. She cooked for neighbors whose husbands had marched away, and she listened when widows came to weep in her kitchen. But her own heart carried its private ache, an ache sharpened each time she heard news of fresh battles. That July, word spread of a bloody clash along the James River. Entire regiments had been shattered. Clara hurried to the post office every day, her breath catching whenever her name wasn't called. Then, at last, a letter arrived, creased, dirt-stained, the handwriting hurried but alive. Clara, my love, I survived the fighting, though at great cost. The faces of the fallen haunt me. Men I shared bread with only yesterday are gone today. Do not grieve for me, I am whole, though weariness clings to my bones. Pray for my comrades, for so many will never see home again. Clara wept as she read those lines, torn between relief and sorrow. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it under her pillow, as though Daniel's words might guard her dreams. But loss came closer than she expected. One autumn evening, a knock sounded at her door. It was Margaret Hayes, Daniel's mother. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. In her palm was a telegram. Clara's breath froze. It's from the army, Margaret whispered. They say Jonathan is gone. Jonathan, Daniel's older brother, had fallen at Antietam. Clara embraced Margaret as the woman broke into sobs, holding her as though grief might drown them both. That night, Clara realized the war would never leave her untouched. Even if Daniel lived, the family she hoped to marry into would never be whole again. After the funeral, Clara wrote Daniel a letter filled with careful words. She told him of Jonathan's bravery, of his mother's grief, of how the town had laid flowers on his grave. She didn't tell him of her fear, that his name might be next on a telegram. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's letters grew fewer, as battles pressed harder. When they did come, they carried a darker tone. Clara, I fear I am no longer the man who left Willow Creek. The war has carved deep lines into my soul. Yet when I dream, it is always of you, your hand in mine, your voice calling me home. Hold fast to me in your prayers, for they are the rope that keeps me from falling. Clara read the words by lamplight, her tears dropping onto the page. She whispered aloud, as though Daniel could hear her through the night air. You are still my Daniel. And I will wait. No matter how long. No matter how dark. The bridge where they had once walked together stood silent now, its wooden planks weathered by rain. But Clara went there often, placing her hand on the railing, looking out over the water, and imagining Daniel's shadow beside her. It was the only way she could keep him near. Winter settled over Willow Creek with a heavy hand. The once green fields lay bare beneath frost, and chimneys poured smoke into a gray sky. Clara kept her candle burning each night, the same ritual she had begun since Daniel left, but the weeks grew quieter. No new letters arrived. At first, she tried to be patient. The post was often delayed, battles made roads impassable. Any day now, she told herself, smoothing her skirts as she walked to the post office. But each time the clerk shook his head, her heart fell a little deeper into shadow. By January, it had been 2 full months since Daniel's last letter. Neighbors whispered kindly when she passed. The post is slow, they said. He'll write soon. But in their eyes she read the truth they feared to speak, that sometimes letters stopped for good. Clara refused to believe it. Each night she knelt by her bed, clutching the locket he carried. Bring him back, she prayed. Let him live, even if scarred. Just bring him back. The silence, however, pressed heavier with every dawn. In February, a messenger rode into town, weary and mud-stained. He carried a bundle of letters gathered from the front. Clara rushed forward, her pulse quickening, but when the names were read, Daniel's was not among them. Her knees nearly gave way. That night, she wandered to the old bridge. The creek below ran sluggish with ice, its surface glinting in the moonlight. She gripped the railing, her breath clouding in the cold air. For the first time since he left, doubt whispered in her heart, what if he will never walk this bridge again? Yet even in her grief, she clung to the promise he had made. I'll come back, no matter what it takes. His voice echoed in her memory, strong and certain. Clara pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, I believe you, Daniel. I have to. Still, as March came, she felt herself thinning beneath the weight of waiting. She taught her students with a smile, but when the schoolhouse emptied, she sat alone at her desk, staring at the door as though he might walk through it. One evening, while returning home, she passed Margaret Hayes's farmhouse. The windows were dark, the family diminished since Jonathan's death. Margaret called her in, offering tea. Clara sat by the fire, listening as the older woman spoke of Daniel as a boy, how he had once carved wooden soldiers and marched them across the floor. He was always stubborn, Margaret said, a faint smile trembling on her lips. If any man can find his way back, it will be Daniel. Clara carried those words like a torch through the darkness of waiting. Yet the silence stretched on, and her heart grew wary. She had no way of knowing that far away, in the chaos of battlefields and hospitals, Daniel Hayes was fighting not only for his country but for the chance to keep his promise to her. The silence ended in the spring of 1863, though not in the way Clara had prayed for. It was a Sunday morning when a rider clattered into Willow Creek, his satchel bulging with folded papers. A small crowd gathered at the post office as names were called. Clara stood at the edge, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. At last, she heard it, Miss Clara Whitmore. The letter was not Daniel's hand. The script was uneven, as though written in haste, and the paper bore the stains of dirt and blood. Clara's breath caught as she unfolded it. Miss Whitmore. I write on behalf of your intended, Daniel Hayes. He was struck during the last engagement and now lies in a field hospital. Though his wounds are grave, he breathes still. He clutched at his locket and whispered your name before sleep took him. Know that he is in the care of our surgeons, and that we will do all we can. The letter was unsigned, save for the initials J.T., likely a fellow soldier. Clara's vision blurred with tears. Relief and terror warred in her chest. He was alive, yet hurt. Alive, yet far away. That evening, she sat by the fire with her father, the letter trembling in her hands. "I should go to him," she whispered. Her father's face softened. "Child, the front is no place for you. All we can do is pray." But prayer no longer felt enough. Clara began to write letters daily, knowing Daniel might not receive them but needing to send them all the same. She filled page after page with words of love and strength. "Daniel, you are stronger than this war. You are more than a soldier, you are my heart, my home. Hold on for me. Do not let the darkness take you." Weeks passed before another message arrived, this one in Daniel's own hand, though shaky and uneven. "My beloved Clara, I cannot write much. My arm pains me, and the fever comes and goes. Yet I live. I live because of you. When I thought the end was near, I pressed your locket to my lips and remembered the bridge, the way the sunlight danced in your hair. That memory carried me back. If I have strength left, it is yours." Clara pressed the letter to her lips, her tears falling freely. She whispered into the night, "I am here, Daniel. Always here." For the first time in many months, she allowed herself to hope. Still, hope was fragile. Rumors swirled of new campaigns, fiercer than before. The war was not ending, it was sharpening. Clara knew Daniel might yet be called back to the front. She could only cling to the promise that somehow, across the miles of blood and sorrow, their love remained a tether strong enough to guide him home. By 1865, the war had burned itself nearly to ash. Rumors of surrender spread like spring winds through Willow Creek, bringing relief, yet also fear. Clara knew too well that the final days of war could be the bloodiest. Daniel's last letter had come months before, his hand steadier, his tone stronger. He had written of healing, of a hope that he might soon come home. Clara held that letter to her chest nightly, whispering his words until she knew them by heart. Then, silence fell once more. The town buzzed with news, Lee retreating, armies scattering, the nation gasping toward peace. Families crowded the post office, desperate for word. Clara stood among them, her heart pounding. Some received joyous letters, others, the dreaded black-bordered telegrams. For her, there was nothing. When the news of surrender finally reached Willow Creek, the church bells rang out in wild relief. Neighbors embraced, children shouted, men prayed aloud in the streets. Yet Clara felt only a hollow ache. Peace had come to the nation, but not to her heart. Daniel was not home. Days turned into weeks. Trains brought weary soldiers back to nearby towns. Willow Creek's women lined the platforms, scanning every face for a glimpse of their sons, brothers, husbands. Clara joined them, her eyes searching desperately for Daniel's tall frame, his dark hair. But each time, she returned home alone. Whispers began to circulate. Perhaps he had been moved to a distant hospital. Perhaps he had been taken prisoner. Perhaps, Clara silenced the thought before it could take root. She refused to mourn a man without proof of his death. One evening, she walked to the bridge, the place where it had all begun. The creek shimmered in the twilight, unchanged despite the years of war. Clara leaned against the railing, finally spilling free. "Where are you, Daniel?" Into the wind. "You promised me. You promised." It was Margaret Hayes who brought the first flicker of news. A neighbor passing through Richmond had seen Daniel's name on a list, men wounded and recovering slowly. No one could say for certain where he had gone after, only that he had survived. Clara's heart leapt and faltered in the same beat. Alive, but lost. Saved, but far away. From that moment, she resolved to search. She rode to hospitals in Richmond, in Petersburg, in towns she had never seen. She begged passing travelers for word, combed through newspapers for lists of names. Each time she found nothing, but she would not stop. the land slowly healing from years of neglect. Yet Clara's heart remained restless, hope and despair. Then, on an evening in late July, a knock came at the door. Clara rose from her chair, her hands trembling. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Daniel Hayes stood before her. At first she hardly recognized him. His shoulders, once broad and straight, were stooped with exhaustion. His face was gaunt, marked by scars and the weary lines of a man who had seen too much. One arm hung stiffly at his side, bound in a sling. Yet his eyes, those dark, familiar eyes, still carried the warmth she had clung to for 4 long years. "Clara," he whispered, his voice rough, as though the very sound of her name was a prayer. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely. For a moment she could not move, could not breathe. Then she rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him, clinging as though she would never let go again. He staggered slightly, his good arm tightening around her. "I told you," he murmured into her hair. "I told you I'd come back." They stood on the threshold for a long time, their tears mingling with the summer rain. When at last they moved inside, Clara guided him to the fire. She studied his face, memorizing the changes and the sameness alike. "You're hurt," she whispered. "Not as badly as some," Daniel replied. His voice was quiet, haunted. "The doctors say my arm may never be what it was. But I lived, Clara. I lived because I had something to live for." She reached for his hand, entwining her fingers with his. "You have me. Always." For days, the town buzzed with his return. Neighbors came to greet him, offering food, handshakes, tears of relief. But when the house quieted, Clara saw the shadows in his eyes. He woke often in the night, gasping for breath, his body trembling with memories he could not banish. One evening, he confessed, "I fear I am broken, Clara. I am not the man who left you at this bridge." Clara took his face in her hands, her gaze steady. "War may have changed you, Daniel, but it did not take you from me. You are here. You are mine. And together, we will build something new." His eyes shone, though tears threatened to fall. "How did I deserve you?" "You don't need to deserve me," she said softly. "You only need to stay." And for the first time since he returned, Daniel smiled, not the weary, fleeting curve of his lips, but the true smile she remembered, the one that carried both hope and love. The days after Daniel's return were filled with both tenderness and trials. Willow Creek, like Daniel himself, bore the scars of war. Fences lay broken, fields overgrown with weeds, houses still patched with rough boards where cannon smoke had drifted too close. Life needed rebuilding, and so did hearts. Daniel struggled at first. His arm pained him whenever he tried to work the farm. The once simple tasks, lifting a plow, splitting wood, even buttoning a shirt, often left him frustrated. Clara would find him outside, jaw clenched, staring at his useless arm as though sheer will might restore it. One afternoon she approached him, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. He was trying to mend a fence, the hammer slipping in his weakened grip. The wood rattled to the ground, and he cursed under his breath. "Daniel," Clara said gently, kneeling to pick up the boards, "it doesn't matter if you can't do everything you once did. What matters is that you're here." He looked at her, shame flickering in his eyes. "I don't want to be a burden." She reached for his hand, pressing it against her cheek. "You're not a burden. You're my heart. Let us rebuild together, piece by piece." Slowly, Daniel began to accept her words. He helped where he could, leaning on neighbors and family for what he could not do. And in the evenings, when the work was done, he and Clara walked by the bridge once more. The same place where promises had been made now became the place where healing began.